Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. You know, if you've watched the show before, you know that we cover a variety of topics, from man overboard to marine insurance. And the general idea is to provide you with information that will help you make better decisions and have more fun on the water. And that's the case today. We got a really interesting show for you on some very basic safety items, and they're basic, but they're very important. And joining us to help guide us through this area is Paul Stone, who's the Assistant Harbor Master of Manchester by the Sea.
Yes.
Welcome, Paul.
Welcome. Nice to see you.
Good.
Welcome to Manchester by the Sea.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, we've got a really important show today on basic safety gear, what it is, how to use it. Can you share a little bit about your boating background and a little bit about what the Assistant Harbor Master does?
Sure. I started boating in 1978. I bought a boat, a 27-foot Elko, a wooden boat.
Oh.
And I learned a lot about boating that first year.
Yeah.
I immediately took a Power Squadron safety course.
Oh, yeah?
Where
Yeah.
I learned more. I learned to read Chapman's and always get the updated version.
Right.
And I've had a boat for ever since.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you get a lot of boating experience. And
I-
what do you do as the Assistant Harbor Master?
We primarily patrol the harbor. We take care of all of our equipment, including the aids to navigation, and we respond to emergencies.
Okay.
All different kinds of
All
emergencies.
right. So now that we're in the early part of the summer, there's a lot of activity, especially on weekends, right?
We're starting to get the emergencies. They're happening all around us. So we know we're going to get one too.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Well, that's a great background for the show. So why don't we get right into it?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Paul, this show on basic safety gear is a huge topic, and we can't cover it all today in a half-hour show. But I think we can cover some of the highlights. And the reason I wanted to do this show in particular was I think that safety equipment is oftentimes overlooked by many boaters. They treat it casually, and it's such an important piece of boating. And one of the pieces that comes to me in particular is the Vhf radio. Many people feel that that's one of the most important pieces of gear on the boat. Do you feel that's true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Why do you say that?
It's the fastest way to get in touch with someone who is going to help you, either the Coast Guard or another boater,
Okay.
or the Harbor Master's office.
Okay, well, you've got a cell phone in your belt there. Why not just use that?
Well, first of all, the signal strength fades in and out when you go offshore, and also
It's not durable, is
it's
it?
not
Not
it
durable
doesn't
like
float.
marine electronics.
Yeah, right.
Right, all right. So the cell's a great backup, but it's not as helpful as the VHF.
Yes.
And VHF is going to give you more information, right?
That's
I
correct.
can contact a fellow boater.
Yes,
I can get a weather forecast,
correct.
right? And I can even send my position out to the Coast Guard and vessels if I'm in distress.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Quickly.
So, lot to be said for a VHF.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Paul, you know, when you talk about VHFs, there's a couple important things to keep in mind. One of them is that they're line of sight. So if there's a big obstruction, like a landmass or maybe even a big tanker or something, that signal can't get from one point to the other. So it's a limitation that people should be aware of. You don't normally run into it, but it is a line of sight device. And with a fixed mount, like we've got one here on the console, got a range of about, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 miles, I guess. And they're putting out a 25-watt signal. So pretty powerful in comparison to the portables we'd be talking about. So you got line of sight, you got a certain power, and then what are some of the aspects you got to consider when you're thinking about these?
They all have 55 channels, and recreational boaters talk on 12 to 15 channels.
Right, right.
And what's most important is the antenna placement and the size of the antenna. And make sure you use good cable and good coax connections.
Yes, because you want a good connection from the radio to the antenna, and then you want the antenna up as high as you can,
That's correct.
because it's line of sight.
That's right,
So
it's
the
line of
taller,
sight.
the higher we're off the water, the better our line of sight is, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Well, those are some basics, and people can learn more by reading up on it. But I wanted to switch gears just for a second and talk about DSC. We've got that here on this radio here. Can you explain to people what it is, how it works, and why they might want it?
Sure. DSC is really a new feature on marine radios, and it's basically a digital transmission that goes out to other boaters in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, it's a digital selective calling,
Digital
right?
selective calling.
And-
That's correct.
And there's a red button.
That's the
That's how
MMSI.
They press that button.
You press that button, you hold it down for 5 seconds, the
5
digital
seconds.
signal goes out,
Yeah.
and it will tell the Coast Guard all the information about your boat, who you are, the people on board, all kinds of information that you've previously given the Coast Guard when you've registered the MMSI device.
Right, right. So it's a great tool for you're in an emergency. You got to remember, push the red button, transmits the signal to the Coast Guard, and area boats as well,
Area boats as well.
telling them your position and what the nature of the emergency is.
Yes, anyone that has an MMSI radio, the alarm will go off on their boat and will know what's going on, and,
Right.
and they'll get your position automatically.
Right, so it could be someone very close to you. So help
That's
could arrive a lot more fast, a lot more quickly if you got DSC on your radio.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, Paul, a conversation about safety gear and VHFs wouldn't be complete with talking a little bit about a handheld like I have here in my hand. It's a nice backup for a fixed mount, because the fixed mount could be compromised, right? We could
That's
get
correct.
a big lightning strike that will blow out all the electronics in the boat. We could get water intrusion that covers up all the electrical connections, knocks out the power. So this is a nice addition. A little lower power output on this, right?
Right, that's correct.
About 6 watts?
6 watts,
Yeah.
and the range is 3 to 8 miles.
3 to 8 miles, okay, which is still very effective for most of the boating people do around
That's
here.
correct.
And you can get different versions, right? You can get submersibles and floating ones, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
You can also get one with DSC and MMSI.
Okay.
And they also have units, in case you go in the water, that have a red light
Okay.
for at night.
Okay.
That way the Coast Guard can see you.
That's a nice feature.
That's a nice feature.
Yeah. Yep. So for 150, 200 bucks, this probably makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, Paul, when you talk about VHFs, it's important to understand how they operate.
That's correct.
Right? And they all have a kind of the same basic group of buttons. We're not going to be able to see them all on the TV show
Yes.
today, but could you point out some of the more important ones?
Sure. This is a scan button that we keep our radio on. If there's an emergency, we'll get a call and we'll automatically go to 16 and press this button.
Okay.
This is another button that's the weather.
Weather. That's one
brings
I
in the
use
weather.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also this is the DSC button, so if there's an emergency, you immediately press this button and hold it down for 5 seconds. And that will go right to the Coast Guard.
All right.
And they'll be able to respond to your location.
So I've got scan button. How many? I've got about, I think we said about 55 channels,
55
but we don't
channels.
use many. It's only a handful that
That's
are
correct.
used. So we're going to go 16.9. How about for bridges?
Channel 13.
Channel 13. Yeah. Is that
Yes.
programmed in here, or do I have to select
No,
that?
you have to select that.
Got to select that. Okay. So you're thinking about 13, 16, that Mayday channel 70.
Yes. And when someone hails us with a problem, we try to stay off 16, so we'll tell them to go to channel 12. That's the Harbor Masters channel.
I see. 12 with the harbor mount.
And
okay,
the Coast
that's good
Guard
to
also has
remember.
advisories on 22 and 22A.
22
The
and
Coast Guard
22A.
likes 22 and 22A.
All right.
Then there's also a ship-to-ship channel.
Okay,
That's
well,
1 watt.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So we got a high and low setting,
That's
depending
correct.
upon. So if we're going to a bridge, channel 13, low setting.
Low
right?
setting. If you can't get in touch with them, you can go to high, but you're not supposed to.
I see.
Only if you can't
Okay.
get.
So proper channel, proper transmit strength for the application.
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, Paul, it's very important to know the different features of the different VHF models, and in my opinion, it's just important to understand how to operate the radio.
Correct.
Can you demonstrate for us the procedure if you were going to contact a fellow boater just to do a little radio check-in to make sure your radio is operating properly?
Sure, and I'll do that by calling the Harbor Master here.
Okay.
Manchester Patrol Boat 1 to Manchester Control. Could you give me a radio check, please?
Yeah, Patrol 1, this is Manchester Harbor Control. Loud and clear on that radio check. Over.
Roger, thank you. I'll be out.
Great. So a very simple process to reach your fellow boater. How about a drawbridge? A lot of drawbridges around here. Up in Gloucester, we've got car bridges, the Blyman split there, a canal. We got railroad bridges up there in Gloucester, and again here in Manchester. What would be the proper procedure for dealing with those situations?
Yeah, it's another way to check your radio, and I'll try calling the drawbridge.
Okay.
Manchester Harbor Patrol Boat to Manchester Draw. This is a radio check. Do you receive me?
That's good radio.
Roger, thank you. Over.
Good. So that's a good thing to do. Channel 13, call ahead. You can't see through the bridge. call ahead and he can help you understand when the bridge might go up and down and or the traffic that's on the other side.
Correct.
Well, Paul, you know, one of the most useful functions I can think of for a VHF marine radio is if you get into serious trouble and need to call for help. Can you help us walk through the steps that you'd use a radio to go get help?
Sure, you do a mayday. The first thing you have to do is make sure that the unit is on.
Sure, it's on.
Second,
okay.
you have to locate the DSC button. You
Okay.
lift the hatch, you press this button down for 5 seconds,
Okay.
and then you pick up the mic and you go mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the vessel harbor master. Give your location, which is Manchester Harbor, and the nature of your distress, which is I have a fire on board or I have a person overboard.
Okay.
And you wait for a response from the Coast Guard. And if you don't get a response from the Coast Guard, you call again. You give that on channel 16 so the other boaters in the area will listen
Yes.
and respond. But
Okay.
an important thing that other boaters should do is stay off the radio.
All right.
And that way it stays clear for more communication.
Okay. So let me recap here. Make sure the radio's on. Hopefully it has a DSC feature.
Yes.
You push the button that automatically sends a digital signal that
That's correct.
the Coast Guard other vessels can get.
Yes,
And then you're following up with a physical transmission.
correct.
With the information for boaters that may not have DSC or for
That's
whatever
correct.
reason didn't get that signal.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, Paul, you know, once you get the fundamentals of the radio under your belt, in terms of the differences, the operation, that sort of thing, it seems to me that for many boaters it'd be easy to forget, particularly the operation. So it seems like the idea of practicing on a regular
Absolutely.
basis would be helpful.
Definitely. Use the radio, be comfortable with it, play with the buttons, call people on the radio, and just make sure that every single time that you go out, you know how to use that radio.
Right. So call your fellow
Call
boaters.
your fellow boaters.
Practice using it with the bridges. Just repetition is going to help you get comfortable with it, so it's like easy and automatic when you really need it, right?
That's right.
Yep. Well, Paul, you know, another very basic but important piece of safety gear on board a boat, it used to be called a life preserver, now they call them personal flotation devices, or PFDs.
Yes.
And there are different classes of them for different applications, right?
That's right.
Okay. And the first, the biggest dog on the block, if you will, is the Type 1, which is for commercial use, and that has about 22 pounds of buoyancy, right? It's got
Yes.
a lot of buoyancy. We don't have one of those today, but
No.
you'd see that if someone's operating on a commercial fishing boat or
Offshore.
a tanker or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now this one I have in my hand, this is a Type 2.
That's correct.
This is something a lot of boaters are familiar with. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, this is the standard jacket that everyone carries on board. What the Coast Guard recommends is that you keep it accessible and nearby. And
Right. We're going to be
around the
talking
boat.
more about that. But that's something that we grew up with, but a lot of people don't like to wear them, right? Because they're
That's
bulky.
correct.
They're
That's
bulky. So
correct.
they're very effective, but they're bulky. Now this is a Type 3 for a child.
That's correct.
How is that different than a Type 2?
Well, you can tell that this device is designed to keep the child's head up in the water.
Yes.
And it is custom fitted for a child that's this size, so the
Okay.
child doesn't slip out of it.
All right. And this is be good for like a lake or water sports or that sort of thing,
and
right?
the child should be wearing it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, let's put that down. Now this is a number 4, a throwable.
A throwable. This is
Yeah.
for man overboard. You're supposed to immediately throw this device if someone falls off your boat.
Okay.
And that way it, the person can swim to it, but you can also track where the person was last seen, and this will help you do that.
Right, great visibility on something like that,
Yes.
huh? I personally like this as an alternative for a 4 because you can use them in the boat, and then they're usually readily available, easy to throw over. Not as good as the ring you were just pointing out, but perhaps more practical for many boaters.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're supposed to put your arms through it in the water, and it
Okay.
helps you to float.
Okay, all right, good. And then we've got Type 5s on. Let's talk about these, because these are fairly recent. What do we think, maybe 5 or 10 years
5 or
it
10
became
years.
popular.
Right.
These are the inflatable vests. Some of the attributes are they're lightweight,
Yeah.
they're not bulky,
That's correct.
they fit pretty well, they don't get in the way, they're not cumbersome.
They
So
don't
this
get
is
hot.
what, yeah,
Yeah, if it's 90 degrees out, these aren't going to bother you.
right. And there's a couple different versions, right? There's a version that inflates automatically
Yes.
and one with a pull cord,
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you recommend either one of those?
I'd say either one.
Either
as
one.
long as you wear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know and there's inshore and offshore.
Yes.
The inshore one's inflatable is about $100. Offshore, about $200.
That's correct.
Personally, I think that's a good investment. For another $100, you get
Absolutely.
really heavy-duty protection,
Absolutely.
right?
Especially here where we have cold water.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
And these will pop up. If I fell in that water, the automatic inflator would fill the vest
Yes.
and keep my head and that part of my body out of the water, right? Which is
That's
key.
correct. Key.
Yeah. Well, Paul, just like other pieces of safety equipment on board, there are some things to bear in mind when you think about personal flotation devices. And one that strikes me is, do you run into many instances where people just buy the new product, keep it in the plastic, and then store it away where people can't see it?
That's correct. Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Is that an issue?
It's absolutely an issue.
Right.
It should be stored where people can easily access it, and it's the responsibility of the captain of the boat to tell everybody on board where they are and how to use it, because the captain could become disabled.
Right. So I would get everyone to know. Take them out of the plastic, put them in a place where people can access them quickly.
Yes.
Right. How about sizing? So if I get a 250-pound guy and I get a 125-foot woman, will the sizing be any different?
Well, you have to buy life jackets that cover different sizes.
Right.
And you also have to practice with these.
Yes.
And make sure that you can open them up right away.
Right.
That's why they shouldn't be in the package. They should be out. And make sure they fit.
Right. Make sure they fit.
everybody.
So if someone
Right.
comes on board, I've got a big guy, say, you try that one on, make sure that fits for you.
Right.
I got a smaller woman next to him. You try that one on and fit it to you, right?
And kids.
And
show
kids,
them.
too.
The kids should be wearing it anyway.
Right, all the time.
All the
right,
time.
right. So make sure if you got them, they're accessible and you can fit them. The last thing that occurs to me would be wear and tear, that maybe if they're incorrectly stored out in the weather, that these things could deteriorate over time. So you'd have them on board, but they're just not effective. Have you
That's
seen that
correct.
sometimes too?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen them with holes in them, and if the thing is compromised, you should really replace it.
Right.
And if you get pulled over by the Coast Guard, they're going to tell you to replace it.
Right. And it's cheap insurance, right?
That's right.
Cheap insurance, yep. Well, Paul, fire extinguishers are an important component of an overall safety gear portfolio, if you will. And the reason for that, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one that's easy to remember is if you get a fire in your house, you can leave typically, go
Right.
out the door.
Yes, you can't do that on a boat.
But if you're a mile offshore, that's much more difficult,
You're in
isn't
a
it?
lot of trouble.
You're in a lot of trouble. So fire prevention, fire suppression, really key. Now, the Coast Guard divides what you need into basically 3 categories, right? An A,
Yes.
B, and C based on the boat length, right?
Yes.
So A is what? Up to
A is
26
up
feet?
to 26.
26 feet, and you're required to have
One.
one of these B1s like we're
Right,
holding right here.
correct. Right. That
Yeah.
fights all 3 kinds of fires.
Second category is B, that's what, 26 to 40
26
feet?
to 40.
How many
right.
do you need there?
2.
Need 2?
2.
All right,
And then over 40, you need 3.
need 3,
Right.
okay. And you want, as you just mentioned, a B. They come in like an A, B, or C grades of fire extinguishers, right?
Yes.
And the first one is for,
A is for
Ash, right?
Right.
and the B is for boiling,
Boil,
which
which
would
is
be
gasoline.
flammable liquids, right?
Right, that's
yeah, which
correct.
is what you're most likely to see.
And
then,
C is for current,
all right,
electrical current.
All right. So the Coast Guard requirements revolve around Bs.
That's right, because they fight all 3 fires.
Okay. And then you've got a B1 and a B2. What's the difference between a B1 and a B2? I think it's the amount of the discharge load or the chemical in here, right?
Yes. The size of the fire that the extinguisher is going to fight.
Right. So I think a B1 is about 2 or 3 pounds of,
Yes, correct.
of chemical, and the B2 is about 10 pounds, I think, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So it's important to get the right extinguisher and the right number of
That's
them.
right. Be in compliance.
Be in compliance, yes. Well, Paul, in terms of these fire extinguishers, there's some important points to consider. One is accessibility, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So we probably want one in the cockpit.
One in the cockpit so you can get to it right away when
Yeah.
something bad happens.
And perhaps one in the salon or where they're the galley,
Right,
where you get a fire, and oftentimes people put them in the engine compartment.
that's true.
Right. So you want them to be accessible. How about status-wise? How can you tell if they're good or not?
You have to constantly check the gauge,
Yeah.
make sure it's in the green. If it goes out of the green, replace it.
Right. So it's most of the thing is red, but you get
Yes.
that narrow sliver of green. And that's where you want to, and you want to check that before you launch,
Yes.
and then throughout the season.
Throughout
right?
the season, yes.
Yeah. And do you have to? I know the chemicals here can settle a little bit. Is
Yeah,
it a good
you're supposed
idea
to
to tip them
periodically
over every now and then and give them some
Shake it.
taps?
Yeah, the stuff will
Shake it?
settle to the bottom.
Okay.
And just make sure it's still good.
All right.
Right.
So accessible, current,
Current
and active.
and usable.
And usable. Well, Paul, you know, manufacturers and dealers do a pretty good job of outfitting boats with the right fire extinguishers for the use, but usually boaters don't have a need to use them, so they may not know how to use them. Can you demonstrate for us how to use a fire extinguisher?
Sure. The first thing you do is pull the yellow, and then you pull out the pin, which just fell over.
Just
and
came
then
out,
you
yep. Point at the base of the fire, right?
Point it right at the base of the fire, and then work your way up.
I see. Well, Paul, you know, another part of the safety, basic safety equipment puzzle are flares,
Yes,
right? Now, these are required by the Coast Guard for boats over 16 feet,
that's right.
right? Operating in what? U.S. coastal waters, Great Lakes, and I think rivers that flow into the ocean that are of a certain size, I think 2 miles across.
Yes, navigable waters.
Navigable waters, okay. So the Coast Guard says you gotta have these, and there's 2 camps. There's pyrotechnic, or things with flames,
That's right.
and non-pyrotechnic, battery powered usually, right?
Right.
And you need to have a certain basic portfolio of signal flares. I think it's 3 for daytime and 3 for nighttime.
Right, or 3 combinations.
Or 3 combinations, right? Okay, all right, so you gotta have that. Now, what a lot of people find is convenient, I know I do, is to buy a kit like this one we have right here.
Yes.
If we take the top off here, can you pull out the pieces there and tell
Sure.
us what's in there?
Well, this is a signal flag. So,
So this would be a daytime.
yeah, that's a daytime flag.
Yep,
One of the universal signals that you're in distress.
okay, we don't need to open it all the way up, I don't think.
Okay.
But, yeah, we got the
This
flag.
is flares.
Yeah,
You have to check and make sure that they're up to date.
right. So those are 4, I think there's
these are
4 of those in a
combination.
package.
Right,
Those are
these are
combinations just like
combination.
these ones we
Yep.
have here.
This is a signal gun.
Flare gun, yeah.
A flare gun. This fits inside. You fire that, hold it way up over your head,
That goes way up, right?
up to 500 feet.
Yes.
That's correct.
So that's great because that increases the visibility. If people need to see you, they can only see you so far when you're holding a handheld, but just throw that flare way up in the sky. That's going to make a big difference,
That's
right?
right. More people can see you.
Yeah.
This is a light stick for if you don't have power in your boat. Green light stick. You can see at night.
Okay.
Extra.
Shells for the meteor gun.
That's
Yeah.
right. And a whistle
And a whistle.
that you'd want to keep with you if you go in the water.
Right. So again, the kit is a nice way to go because it's going to have all your stuff together in a
Right.
water-type container.
Right.
That might be a good suggestion for people to come in mind, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, Paul, when you're talking about visual distress signals and flares, historically you light them and you hold them up or you fire them up, but recently, and just in the last couple of years, they come up with what they call with electronic flares.
Yes.
Now, here's an example of one here, all right, electronic visual beacon.
Right.
These have some advantages, don't they?
They do. They're brighter.
They're brighter,
And,
go
they
up to
don't-
10 miles, right?
That's right. And they don't expire.
They don't expire, right?
Right.
So the regular handheld flares have, I think, a 3.5-year shelf life from
That's
the time of
correct.
manufacture to the time they're expired. This, of course, you got to replace the batteries,
Yes.
but you don't have any expiration date.
That's right. And
Right.
you can hold them in your hand where you don't get burned.
You don't get burned, yeah. So I think this is something for people to consider.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily to replace the handheld or the guns, but to complement that.
Yes.
What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Okay. Paul, when it comes to flares, there's a few important points to keep in mind. One of them that strikes me right off the top would be accessibility. Do you see many people, they get the flares and then they put them out underneath the bunk in the forward cabin?
Oh, absolutely. You have to keep it accessible. You have to
Not
know
a good
where
place.
it is.
You got to keep them accessible, to come out of the package, make them easy to get to. What else? How
yeah.
about expiration? Is that an issue?
You have to check the expiration, good for 42 months. And also, you have to practice with them. You have to know how to light it.
Right.
And
Because most people would
So you
never
don't
have
get
the
hurt.
chance. Right.
that's right.
Yeah. So keep them accessible, keep them current, and have a clue how to make them work.
That's right.
Well, Paul, in terms of flares, it's a good idea, of course, to have the right number and those that are current on board. But the second piece of the equation is knowing how to actually use it. Can you demonstrate for our viewers how to use a flare properly?
Sure. First you flip the top, expose the striking substance.
Okay.
Then you hold it like this.
Might take a couple strikes to get it to
Yep.
go.
Then you hold it up so you don't burn yourself.
Is the wind direction anything important?
Yes, you want the wind in front of you,
In front of
so all the smoke and debris goes behind you.
I see. And we're holding it over the side of the boat,
Yes.
over the water, so
Correct.
that hot slag or whatever is coming off it doesn't fall in the boat and cause a fire, right?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. So this will burn about
3 minutes?
3 minutes, yeah.
Yep, 3 minutes.
Yeah, very visible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Paul, it's hard to believe, but it's time to wrap up the show today.
Okay.
And we've covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
You know, and different basic safety gear that makes a tremendous difference in the safety of the people going boating. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up the show today?
Well, sure. First, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah.
And this stuff is complicated, but you can get through it.
Right,
You have to just
right.
read the material.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's any questions that people have, they should contact the Coast Guard, number one source.
Okay.
Coast Guard Auxiliary,
Yeah.
local harbor master, police departments. And if you want to get in touch with us by email, you can email harbormaster at
Yeah.
manchester.mass.us.
Okay, so manchester.ma.us, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
if they
yeah.
got a question, they want to just get a quick response, you guys can help them, right?
Yeah, or go on the website.
Go
we
on
have
the
our own
website.
website, right.
Beautiful idea.
There's also another website, Massachusetts Harbor Masters Association, and
Okay.
they have all the information for all the various harbor masters.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for watching the show. If you have comments or questions, please contact us at the website www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.